Alright, this is the next section. This is where we're going to deal with installing InfluxDB into the Docker as a service. Right, so this is essentially the same steps generally. The basics, Docker Compose file, the tools, and some testing. Okay, so the basics of InfluxDB is it's a time series database. So what you effectively actually have is databases and then measurements, and measurements are much like a relational database, what you call a table. Alright, this is the website. It's a company, it's called influxdata.com. Yeah, then this is sort of the whole feature of the way InfluxDB works. So it's very much meant for metrics, events, logs, things like that. So you can see you accumulate, analyze, and act. So you've got visualization, alerts, and triggers. Once again, like most of these fields, it's open source, and you can see here's the GitHub repository, Influx Data. There are a lot of different parts to InfluxDB. There's plugins and all kinds of things. This is one of them called Telegraph. At this stage, I'll only just focus on the Influx database, just InfluxDB. Okay, so yeah, we are essentially in the fourth part now. So these two are grouped together. So we're going to do InfluxDB now, and the next one I'll do Grafana. They're very, very related to each other. You'll see a lot. Whenever you see Grafana, you often will see InfluxDB. Although Grafana does handle other database sources, many database sources, it doesn't, but it works very well with InfluxDB because of the time series database. Okay, so there once again you can see InfluxDB and Docker work very well together. Alright, this is the compose file. Once again, this is now step 4. This is what I will copy across into the Raspberry Pi. So once again, you can see the container name, the image, goes and fetches it from Docker Hub. This is the port that gets exposed, and then it has an environmental file which sits in that setup. This has just got a few settings in it, passwords and things like that. And then once again, you have the volume data. This allows the data that's inside the container to be sort of mirrored on the outside. So it's quite powerful. This is the Docker Hub, InfluxDB. You can see, once again, I think it's what 500 million pools. You know what I mean? So it's pretty amazing, pretty staggering. Okay, this is one of the tools that I'll show you. It's called Time Series Admin. It's sort of a Windows app, but I think it runs on many other platforms as well. Allows you to kind of do sort of, even though InfluxDB is a no SQL database, you still can use SQL type commands. So select from this, and alright, so that's the one tool. Okay, this gives you a bit more of an overview. You can see this is sort of what it looks like. You give it the address, username, password, and the database, and then you can actually go and explore, look at the history and all kinds of stuff. Alright, then the other one that's very powerful is a DB client. This comes from InfluxDB's site. So you can download this. This is for Windows, but you get for, if you have a look over here, you get it for Linux, Mac OS, whatever. So you can see this is Influx 1.8.3. All it is a directory. You unpack it, and it's just a bunch of executables. The only one that I'll use at this stage is just called Influx. And so what that allows you to do is to almost log into the database and issue commands, create databases, drop databases. Okay, now this is the other important thing. Inside Node-RED, you have, which I mentioned in the Node-RED section before, you have these nodes that are on the left side. So you get an in and an out, and so these are the things that you drag across onto the palette inside Node-RED. and then you double click on it and change parameters and set things up. So this is now part of one of the flows that you'll get off Node-RED's site. Yeah, again is a picture basically just showing you this is what the type of information you can get in Grafana. So amazing, as you can see, dashboards and graphs and stuff. And in the next section, it'll effectively be the culmination of all the work up to this point to actually be able to see the data coming in real time. And you know, you can have many sources of data, you can aggregate, you can do means, you can do averages, you can show it as graphs, you can show it as charts, you can set the colors. It's really truly awesome. This is sort of what the measurement looks like. So you have your sensor 1 like we're doing, the temperature, and then every reading is effectively time stamped. This is some of the differences between a relational database and a time series database in InfluxDB. So you can see a table is a measurement. You have your primary index in this, because it's a time series database, is time, and then you have columns which are fields and tags, and then you can actually you have rows and columns, and that almost like a relational database. You can do select and joins and groups and orders and stuff like that. These are some of the commands that I'll show the video later on. We will show the databases, create a database, use it, show your measurements, and then once Node-RED is up and running and it's entering data into the database, you can actually do a select and see the records as they're coming in. This is a mention of someone, is the guy with a Swiss accent. He's on YouTube. I will put a link in some of the attachments and the uploads. Really amazing stuff. He covers all kinds of topics, but he has this YouTube particularly about using InfluxDB and Node-RED. Definitely worth a watch. Right, okay, in this section I am going to go through the steps to install InfluxDB. This is very much the same process as before, like we've done with the other 3 steps, Portainer, Mosquito, MQTT, and Node-RED. In this case we will now do step 4, which is InfluxDB. So what I will do is copy that across into our Raspberry Pi using WinSCP. Okay, as simple as that. What you have in here again is a Docker Compose file and a setup directory with some InfluxDB information, environmental variables. If we now go across to the terminal, we do ls, you'll see there's now 4 directories. If we now change into the 4th directory, do an ls over there, you'll see there's the Docker Compose, and now all we need to do now is to run Docker Compose up. Okay, and what will happen is it will fetch the same process as before. It will fetch the image file from Docker Hub, and InfluxDB is not very big. It's a very powerful database. It's a time series database, so it's kind of known as a NoSQL database, in the sense that it is not like a relational database. So it has in the slides you saw, it actually has, instead of having tables, it has measurements, and there's sort of it's very much suited for time series type of information, which is perfect for things like temperature logging or any kind of environmental sensors or things like that, something that varies over time, and you want to take a sample on a regular basis, once a second, once a minute, once an hour. It has sort of aggregation rules and stuff, so as time goes by, it has retention rules, so you can actually tell it, like, you know, in a month, only keep every sort of week data and stuff. Okay, so there you can see, pretty quick, up and running. Okay, so if you look now on your Portainer dashboard and we refresh it, we'll see there now 4 containers. So there we actually have now Portainer, Mosquito, Node-RED, and lastly InfluxDB. And InfluxDB exposes itself on 8086. Once again, you can look at statistics, logs, whatever, through the normal way as I described before. It's a command line tool, so this is what it looks like. So the first thing we need to do from the slides is we'll need to, if you go through the commands, you can say show databases. Alright, you'll see, because it's a freshly created Influx installation, there are no databases, there aren't anything. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a database for the sensor data. So we say create database, just database, and we say sensor underscore data and type it, and basically if there's no errors, it'll give us the next prompt. If we now went through the previous one and said show databases, you'll see now we actually have now sensor data. So the idea now is to say use sensor data. Yeah, keep doing this all day long. Use sensor data, and there it goes and says using sensor data. And if you now, the next type of command is to say show measurements. Okay, and in this case you'll see there's no measurements. Okay, at this point now what we will do now is to go across to Node-RED and sort of create the kind of hooks that will now feed data into InfluxDB. Previously we created this Node-RED, so this is this is now picking up the MQTT data. So the idea now would be to create another tab, and I have it over here, but what I'll do is go through it step by step. So what you would want to do now is you'd want to get this exact same data here. So you would copy this, go across to this flow here, paste it. So now that's your MQTT data coming in. What you would want to do now is you would put just a debug thing on you, a debug node, so that we can actually see what's happening with the data. What we can do is go to this one and turn all of them off. So we'll only be getting data from this one, from this tab. So the idea now is to create a function that will now take this reading, which is effectively a string. You can see here it's a 2.28.4, so it's a string. So we want to convert that so we use a function node. Basically inside here now you're able to, we want to create a variable var. Okay, let's just type that down. So we want to call this data ds18b20, and we will make it equal to message.payload, and then we would want to parse float. Okay, that is a Java function that will now convert this text string into a float. Let's just put your float. Oh, can't spell today. Alright, and then once we've got that, we would then we want to now we've now copied the value that was passed in into this variable. We'll now want to create a variable that we're going to pass out, which is the data that's going to be passed to the InfluxDB. So we will go message dot payload is equal, and then we will make a JSON string. So we will what we want to do is in the InfluxDB we want to enter two values. So we would want to say the sensor, so sensor, and then double dot, and then a string. So this will be DS8. No, this will be DS sensor1. DS sensor1. Okay, and then comma, and then the second data would be now the temperature in C, in Celsius, and then that value will now be that DS18B20, this variable over here we're passing in. And okay, once we've done that, that's now our little program. So if you go done, if it has an error, it normally creates a little red triangle over here. For instance, I'll probably show you here if I leave out this exclamation mark now, you'll see there leaves a red thing there, and if I go done, you'll see it leaves a little red there to tell me there's an error. So I need to close those brackets. Let's do that. And the red goes away. If we do that, that goes away. So now the idea is to feed it into an InfluxDB. So you look here for the InfluxDB out. So that's this one here. So we would connect this now into here. It'll convert that value now into an entry into the database. So this would get connected to here now. And what we need to do now in the InfluxDB is we would need to set up a new influx database. Okay, so you would do that. You need to pick 1.x version of InfluxDB. There is a version 2 which has a lot of more advanced features, but we're using 1.6 or 1.8. Okay, so you'd give the address of the Raspberry Pi .168.1.165, and then the database we just created in the other thing there, we called it sensor_data, and then the password is node-red, and node-red, and then we can just give it a nice friendly name here, so we can say influx db sensor data, sensor data, well, let's just give it the right, so sensor_data. So that means if we look at it, we at least know. Okay, so that now is our hook into the database, the link into the actual database itself. Then the measurement that we want to use now, we're going to call it temp logs. Okay, so this is the measurement. We can again over here go influx db temp logs. Okay, so once we've done that, there you can see now. Alright, so what you'll effectively have now is these values are coming in. What I can do is show you another tool. This tool here, you can actually see now. This is the time series admin that I showed in the slides. So you can see I've set it up here 192.168 and then port 8086, the user password, and there's the sensor database. So you can save that connection data. If you then go, I've got a lot of different ones here, as it is at the bottom. If you go to the Explorer and you double click on that, or you bring this down, you see it shows your sensor data, and at the moment there's no measurements, there's no series, there's no retention policies. Well, the default is AutoGen. Okay, so what we would do now, if we also went across to the other tool, we could actually go and say select star, or let's just do the show measurements again quickly. Show measurements, you'll see there's nothing. Okay, that's because we haven't entered any data into the database yet. So the moment we go now onto Node-RED and we deploy this flow, the moment the data now starts coming through, now it's being pushed into the database. So if we went back to this command line thing now and we ran show measurements, you'll see now it shows temp logs. And if you went select star from temp logs, you can see now, so there each 10 seconds it's going to add another record. So if you can see there's 6 now. If we wait 10 seconds and we do another one, I need to wait a little bit longer, there's 7 now, you see. So every 10 seconds it'll add another reading, and this is the time, this is the timestamp. This is a nanosecond accurate timestamp. And then when I do the next section, we'll use Grafana, and Grafana will allow us to graphically show this over time. At the moment, you'll see if we ran it again now, it's a few seconds gone by, there's another. If we went back across now to that other tool, this one here, you actually can go and say select star from what did I call it now, temp logs, we tell it to limit it to 20. So if you run here, you'll see now this is exactly the same data you saw in the other tool. So yeah, you can see the name of the measurement, it's called the measurement, but it's kind of like a table. These are the time stamps, and then you actually have you saying which sensor, so it's DS sensor 1. If you had more than one sensor, you could create for each sensor, you could create sensor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when you come to your SQL statements, you can actually tell it to only give you this and to average and mean and whatever you need to do. If we run this now, you can actually see now how it shows now what measurements are now available. And if you click down on this, you know what I mean, it shows you what series you have, etc. Alright, so there's 13. If I go run this query again, go to the bottom here, you'll see it's 19. So it's going every 10 seconds, it's putting another record into the data, into the database. We run this again, you'll see there it is there now. Temperature is very stable at the moment, but when I have the Grafana on, I will take this, stick it in the freezer or something, so you can see how the temperature goes down over time. This is as this was now InfluxDB, and what we will do in the next section is Grafana. So until then.